Hello, the Pioneer viewers. Today I will share with you a very critical report about the Russia-Ukraine war. What does a government need to ensure its legitimacy? Of course, public support. If this legitimacy is ensured, citizens obey the laws set by that government and administration of the state continues in the normal process. Otherwise, an environment of turmoil and chaos is created, right? In fact, there is such a situation in every organization with the management units. Legitimacy is everything. So how is the legitimacy of the rulers, i.e. commanders, ensured in an army? What does it depend on? Of course, the support of the soldiers serving in the army legitimizes the army leaders and commanders. However, in the Russian armed forces, this situation seems to be disappearing in a not very long time. Recent reports shows us that Russian soldiers are quite complaining. Of course, they complain about Russian commanders. Moreover, the legitimacy crisis in Russia is not only related to the army. We should also note that large popular movements against the Russian administration are about to begin. So what is happening in the Russian army and the Russian people? Let's take a look at the developments together. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss the daily map reports and agenda reports we prepared as the Pioneer team. You can also help us improve our content by commenting on our videos. I read all your comments. Let's start if you're ready. The Pioneer reports. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss the daily map report and agenda reports we prepared as the Pioneer team. You can also help us improve our content by commenting on our videos. I read all your comments. Let's start if you're ready, the Pioneer reports. As you know, there is a very intense pressure of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Kherson front line. The Ukrainian armed forces are forcing the Russian armed forces to retreat with the attacks they carry out every day. There is a situation here. There are several reasons for the Russian failure in the region. The first reason is the insufficient firepower of the Russian armed forces in the region. When we mention artillery activity in our map reports, we also mention that the attacks carried out by the Russian artillery. However, the artillery activity is not sufficient. Generally, the short range and the low impact power make the artillery activity of the Russian army ineffective. The other reason is the commanders. As you know, many times since the beginning of the war, we have brought the problems of the Russian soldiers with their Russian commanders to your screens. Even a Russian commander was executed by one of the soldiers under his command. I remember that this incident took place on the Kherson front. When we consider the problems experienced by the Russian soldiers on the Kherson front line, it is quite likely that it happened here. Recently, a dispute between Russian soldiers and the Russian commanders on the Kherson front line was reflected in the press. As you know, the position of the Russian army on the east bank of the Dnieper River was cleared by the Russian troops. As you know, the positions of the Russian army on the east bank of the Dnieper River were cleared by the Ukrainian troops. Important positions in the direction of Krinky, Poima and Pechenivka were captured by the Ukrainian armed forces. Repeated counterattacks by the Russian army failed to expel the Ukrainian army from its positions. Moscow administration, on the other hand, is content with minimizing the Ukrainian advance in the region. However, the complaints made by the Russian soldiers in recent days have revealed the facts. Russian soldiers recently reported their experiences in the front line through Russian military bloggers. According to Russian soldiers, the most important reasons for the failure of the Russian troops on the Kherson front line is the incompetence of Russian commanders. According to the allegations of the Russian soldiers, incompetent Russian commanders failed to create a defense line. The statements of the Russian military bloggers are as follows. The personnel of the Russian 17th Motorized Rifle Division, the newly formed 18th Combined Armed Army, often claim about what is happening in the direction of Krinky. One of the main complaints of our soldiers in the area is the insufficient fire support. They also complain of problems with electronic warfare, counter-battery, and air defenses. Under these circumstances, our troops will not be able to dislodge Russian troops from the positions they have taken in the direction of Krinky. Under these circumstances, our troops will not be able to dislodge Ukrainian troops from the positions they have taken in the direction of Krinky. Another Russian military blogger also shared with the public an interesting developments in the direction of Krinky. According to the claims of Russian military blogger, 50 Russian soldiers were destroyed by the Ukrainian armed forces in just 1 hour due to the strategic mistakes of the Russian commanders. It is also claimed that these soldiers published a video before the operations in question, and they were not really in a position to fight in the statements they used in this video. The statements in the video in question are as follows. They deployed us here before, but they didn't give us enough ammunition. We are not the zero line. There are only meters between us and the enemy. We have no ammunition. We don't have ballistic vests. We've been here for months. Most of us haven't rested in a long time. We need to retreat to rest. We begged Defense Minister Shoigu, get us out of here. Russian military bloggers say that 50 Russian soldiers were destroyed by the Ukrainian army after this video. This is a major command error. Russian troops were deployed in an area with largely inadequate ammunition and equipment. Nevertheless, Russian commanders officially threw 50 Russian soldiers as bait in front of the Ukrainian army. Even Russian military writers who formed the beginning of the war characterized the claims of the Russian soldiers as black propaganda and did not publish them, have now begun to openly share these claims. It is clear how bad the situation has become for the Russian army. We also clearly see that how many Russian soldiers have lost their lives due to the strategic mistakes of the Russian commanders. As you know, Russian soldiers fight very reluctantly. The families of many of them are also very angry that Russian soldiers have lost their lives because of the mistakes of the Russian commanders and the ambition of the Russian rulers. Not long after this incident came to the light, there was a huge protest to Moscow. The wives of Russian soldiers took the streets in Moscow. The street demonstrators that we predicted would start for a long time now seems to be starting. The wives of Russian soldiers took the streets in Moscow. The streets demonstrations that we predicted would start for a long time now seems to be starting. Recently, a declaration was published in Russia. This statement was published by the wives of the Russian soldiers who were recruited in the last mobilization. In the content of the declaration, President Putin of the Russian Federation was accused of betraying Russia. After the declaration, Russian anti-war organizations issued a call. Multinational people of Russia, this is an appeal to everyone, or rather a call for help. Our tragedy, which we cannot bear alone, is unfolding before your eyes. Messages began to arrive from the relatives of the soldiers. They say that the Russian people have been betrayed and destroyed by their own rulers. We must put a stop to it. We are taking the streets to be the voice of the Russian families. Following this call, it is reported that preparations are being made for the street demonstrations in the many parts of the Russian Federation. According to the allegations, Russian police are also underfit. We think that we will receive more protests news in the coming days. What do you think? Do you think the operations of the Ukrainian army on the Kherson front line will continue? What do you think about the mistakes of the Russian commanders? Do you think the Russian army will be able to recover? What do you think about the protests of the wives of the Russian soldiers? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.